I'm back with another video. This video is part 2 about my trip to Peru. This video highlights my experience at Lake Sandoval in the Peruvian Amazon. Here we go. This trip begins saying goodbye to Tito and the good people at Carlos Expeditions, getting on a boat up the Tambopata River, traveling to the Madre de Dios River, which translates to Mother of God. We pulled ashore at the Monte Amazonico Lodge. And there we were met by a gentleman named Fernando. Fernando showed us around, much like our previous lodge. There is no air conditioning or hot water, but there is electricity. After we've settled in for a bit, Fernando gathers us. He says, we are about to go on a night adventure. And immediately I am thinking, look, Fernando, I don't know if anyone told you, but 2 nights ago, we were out in the forest at night, and there were some people in the group who were attacked by wasps. I made a run for it. And there are still some people in this group who are a little salty because they feel like I abandoned them in the jungle. Well, truth is I did. Sorry, I'm not sorry. As he sees the apprehension in everyone's eyes, he says, this one's going to be different. We're going to go look for wildlife from the water. We're going to go down, we're going to get in a boat, we're going to cruise along the shoreline. It doesn't take long. As the boat glides along the shoreline, we see something moving in the darkness, and the first thing we see is a caiman. Caiman are part of the crocodilian family. They are similar to alligators and crocodiles. However, they are slightly smaller and thought not to be as aggressive. Caiman can grow up to 16 feet long. However, that is rare. Most of them are somewhere around 7 feet long, and they live somewhere between 30 and 40 years. We cruise along the shoreline for a while, and we see a number of caiman. Some are on the shore, some are entering the water, some are irritated that we're out there shining lights on them. But there were quite a few of them. As we floated along the shore, in and out of little inlets, we find another creature. At first sight, I thought it was a pig. Like, why are we stopping here? But what they really are were capybara. Capybara are the world's largest rodent. Like caiman, they are native to South America. Capybara are closely related to guinea pigs. However, they will weigh up to 70 pounds. Didn't want to get close enough to want to find out, but from what I'm told, they're very friendly. We encountered several groups of capybara rooting around in the dark, and then we decided, okay, we've seen enough, time to return. Return to shore. On the way back to the cabin, I see a snake passing by, and then I've decided, yep, my night is over. So, go to bed, get up, we eat breakfast, we board a boat a few miles down the Madre de Dios River, hike up the shore, and there is a sign that reminds us that we are still in the Tambopata National Reserve. And then Fernando tells us what is about to unfold. Lake Sandoval is one of the unique features in the Amazon. It is a lake that was formed as the Tambopata River changed course, and when it did so, it left Lake Sandoval. Lake Sandoval is 3 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide. It is one of the most biodiverse locations in all of Peru. Here's the thing. There is no river access to Lake Sandoval. You have to hike. And from the boat ramp, it is a 3-kilometer hike from the visitor center to the canal that leads to Lake Sandoval. The hike to Lake Sandoval is on a raised boardwalk. There are several things to see on the way. Fernando tells us to keep a lookout for wildlife, and the first species that we see are a troop of howler monkeys. The sound of howler monkeys can be frightening. However, they will go out of their way to avoid real conflict, especially with people and capuchin monkeys who are much more aggressive. Howler monkeys have a prehensile tail, which means they can use their tails almost as if it were another arm. They are one of the rare species that can do that. The hike to Lake Sandoval takes just under 30 minutes. At the end of the hike, we arrived at a dock where there are several canoes, and it is then when Fernando tells us that there are no motorized vehicles on Lake Sandoval. It is not permitted. You have to paddle. He took it upon himself to do so, and no one seemed to have a problem with that. After we all filed into the canoe, we started down a short canal. There was a small caiman in the water, and then we come to Lake Sandoval. It was quite stunning. When the canoe first entered Lake Sandoval, just a few meters in, we see a group of proboscis bats roosting on a palm tree. Fernando tells us that there are 90 species of bat that live in this area, and they spend their days roosting in the palm trees. We see another capybara foraging ashore, and it's now that I really get a chance to see just how big they really are. There are other groups paddling on the lake. One of those groups spots a splash in the water. The guide of that boat lets Fernando know that he believes that he's found some giant otters, and off we go. Giant otters can grow up to 6 feet long. They are the largest member of the weasel family. They live on several of these several hundred species of fish in Lake Sandoval, and from what Fernando tells us, they can also be quite aggressive. Fernando keeps paddling, and actually I'm starting to feel bad for Fernando because it's really hot out here, but I didn't feel bad enough to volunteer to paddle. So we just kept going. We approached what's called a Hudson bird that is better known by locals as a stink bird, and they received that name because they smell bad. It's about the size of a chicken. However, from what Fernando tells us, that it tastes as bad as it smells. So these birds are quite abundant because nothing wants to consume them. Before we leave, we also see a blue macaw, and he is much closer than the macaw that we saw at the Clay Lake. He's beautiful. Fernando takes a short break while we sit and stare at the macaw, and this macaw sits and stares at us, and then he starts to paddle back out of Lake Sandoval and into the canal back to the dock. If you do this, be forewarned, it's going to be hot, but a trip to Lake Sandoval is well worth it. We paddle back through the canal into the boat dock, and we start the 3-kilometer hike back to the river. On the hike back, Fernando points out this lizard and just how well he camouflages himself from other predators in the forest. We get back to the boat ramp, we get in the boat, and we make it back to the lodge in time for dinner, and then we go sit and watch the sunset. The next morning, we get up early and we go on a tree canopy hike. There is a network of bridges high above the ground that connect trees in the upper canopy. I hiked into the forest and came to a set of stairs to the top of the tree canopy. This is probably 130 feet above the forest floor. The view from here provided a completely different perspective of the rainforest. This was quite an adventure because those bridges are bouncing and moving and swaying as you walk across them. At one point, we sat on one of the tree platforms and just listened to the forest. It was a completely different experience than being on the forest floor. It was pretty cool. Thank you for watching. Please take a moment to click that like and subscribe button. Thank you. We descended down a series of steps to get back to the forest floor, and this marks the end of our Amazon experience. We all grabbed our gear, hiked down to the boat ramp, got into a boat to Puerto Maldonado, where from there I went to the airport to begin the next part of my Peruvian adventure. But before that begins, I will leave you with these. I'll be back with part 3 of my Peruvian adventure soon. Please tune in.